All
Okay,
right. Are you ready to start? Ready to get this party started?
Yeah, can I tell you something though?
Yes.
Scientists recently discovered something coming out of a black hole. Have you heard this?
No, I don't know. I want to sleep tonight, Micah.
They don't even know how to explain it. Like, it's just
Is it a
math everywhere. Everyone trying to figure it out.
Oh,
It's unexplained still. They just witnessed it. That's all.
That does not
Like-
make...
recently? Like this week?
Like within the last 2-3 weeks, maybe the last month. It's very
Okay.
recent.
Okay, that's impressive.
That does not make me feel good. Well, hello there, adventurers. Welcome back to Dungeons and Dragons and Discussions. I am Rick Quasar, and joining me tonight is friends Mary, Beth, and Micah. Thank you, girls, for joining me tonight in our little discussion.
You're welcome.
It better be more than little.
Off the record, I was trying to remember what you did like to talk about. I think I have a good one.
If not, just don't post it.
No, I'll post anything. Maybe. Well, almost anything. If it's in within the rule set. Anyways, tonight we are going on to the topic of the Immortals. Not specifically... Okay, this is where it gets a little touchy. I don't want to talk about like gods and deities because I'm not sure if they fit into this category. More specifically, I have two quote-quote main questions. One is more of a role-play mechanic, and the other is a more combat, I guess. Not 100% combat, but just more of a, hey, will this work type of deal. But we'll focus on the first part because I think that'll be more interesting. So, Immortals. People who... Elves. Dwarves? Do dwarves technically live a long time?
Do you mean long-lived races
Not-
rather than immortals? Because they do die of natural, like, old age.
Yeah. I'm just using elves as an example. I'm more talking about, like, I guess long live would be good, but more of, like, as people that, like, just live forever. A good example would...
Do you mean literally forever, or you just mean like elves that live?
Because none of the player races live forever.
Okay. It's good to know. Well, I guess I can shorten it to say long-lived characters because there's some... I wasn't sure if immortal characters were a thing, like a characters that just live forever.
We could probably call them longevitines.
Ah.
There's items that you can get that will make you immortal.
Mm-hmm. And doesn't
however expensive they may be.
Doesn't druids just like once they get to a certain leveling point, they like age slower than everything else? I feel like I have it open in front of me. I should look it up. I feel like towards like the end, like level 18 or 20, they get a special feature. All right. But anyways, I guess we can more focus on characters like the long-lived characters because that's more achievable than an actual immortal character. So we'll talk about long-lived characters then in that case. Elves and I believe do dwarves have a longer extended life? I should have known.
They are longer lived. They're like closer towards elves if you're comparing them with humans.
Mm-hmm. And yes, druids at 18th level, the primal magic that you wield causes you to age more slowly. For every 10 years that pass, your body only ages 1 year. So I'm also gonna throw druids.
Well, you've got elves that stop physically aging in some books. They stop physically aging at peak maturity, which should be somewhere in the 25 to 35 range.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's cool.
So they don't look like they're getting older.
Yeah, so like elderly elves, that's not really a thing you see, but they show their age in other ways like wisdom and like how they carry themselves.
Right.
Cool. Well, let me actually ask the question, and I can look up the other long-lived characters because it escaped me. Elves are just the most prominent in my mind currently. So the question is like, I'm gonna fall back to immortals only because this is what was in my mind, and I can translate this over to elves. Is the immortals is they're timeless. They live forever. They also live past like all of their friends, their families. So and they experience a lot. So with someone's messaged me in Discord. I gotta silence that. So with the people living, the long-lived people or immortals living for as long as they do they take mental and physical damage? Mental damage. Like, does their mind start to deteriorate?
I mean, so far in our fantasy worlds, we don't really have the diseases other than the ones that we find fun to play, like lycanthropy or something like that. That is still a fantasy world.
Yeah.
But the diseases that exist in our world that we choose to not give our characters, like cancer, dementia, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, those are things that currently hurt us in the real world. Why would we choose to put those in a fantasy world?
That is true. I'm more speaking from I see, the thing is, I gotta be very careful because I don't want to call it like an actual like biological thing. More of a like, I'm trying to think, just like more of a mental side of things. Like Alzheimer's is like, someone help me with Alzheimer's. This is why I need nurse definitions here. But for example, my family, we have genetic dementia. According to my father, and past grandparents on my father's side, we are more prone to dementia, and that's a genetic thing. I'm more talking of like a more mental side of deterioration, not something specifically biological. Like, all I can think of is like someone who is, I can't imagine that, if you're living all these longer years, that it's not going to impact your mind in some type of way.
Well, I think by raw terms and how elves have been explained in RPGs has been that, or even dwarves, it's just elves are usually the more snooty, so they have more opinions, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think Raw lays out that they have a harder time relating to humans and orcs and shorter-lived races with their problems, because everything that has come up as a problem, even like your grandparents, like people these days in human lifespans, eventually start looking at problems as everything's temporary, everything will resolve, everything will be fine, right? But there's also some people who get really catastrophic, and usually they've been affected severely by trauma or seen some crazy stuff in their life. So I think old adventurers who have seen a lot of stuff, that's going to impact their mentality, but it doesn't have to do with the aging process itself. It's about what experiences have you had, what have you seen in the world, and how have you internalized that or not? How have you processed it? So when you're talking about older versions of these races that have been impacted by more time passing, so they have more experiences accumulating, I find it interesting to leave in the hands of game masters, because they can decide to pull in mental diversity into their campaigns or not, because by the rules, that's just not a health concern. It's not a mental concern. As you age, you don't naturally get dumber or have problems with reality.
Yeah.
It's up to the storyteller.
Fair enough.
When it's up to the storyteller or up to the dungeon master, game master, whatever, it may depend on their own personal experiences with anything mental, whether it's from anxiety to dealing with grandparents having dementia, of this is something from the real world that I want to include in my campaign because I find it to be a character flaw or something that someone struggles with that I'm familiar with. So it would be easier as a DM to be able to put that in an NPC, or the complete opposite of I've never struggled with this, or I find this too difficult of something that I've struggled with to put into a character.
And I think that can encourage some play with older characters of races, and inclusion of those represented in different stories as well, based on your own comfort level and knowledge of those. I think it's really interesting that you brought up that the DM's experiences, life experiences, you can pull from that, or just cursory knowledge.
Yeah.
I think it's better to rely on that than to have something in rule books, just because I don't trust publishers to not put in stereotypes about mental conditions that are real and to then affect it, because like we've seen Curse of Strahd come out with a lot of criticism. The whole what is it called, variant race, there's like optional race features now, and there's been a lot of criticism on that from just like, is it originally racist to have inherent qualities assigned to different races that are all make-believe to begin with, but coded into that from real culture, because the publishers come from the real world and that's the knowledge they're drawing from, and what are their biases. So I kind of like that longevity related issues aren't truly represented in Raw, and that's up for interpretation.
Cool. Yeah. All right. I like it. Yeah, and the thing is about all of this is it never all of like the magic and everything really never can be explained, because it doesn't really exist. It's hard to explain the technical difficulties of why a druid ages slower than every other class, or the technical issues with casting a spell, or how healing potions work. Like, oh, can I just put it on the wound? Because it doesn't exist, and it's hard to look at how exactly it would affect everything, because it's not easy to analyze it. Like, we can try to like look at it a certain way, but like you said, it's really up to whoever is playing the game, whoever is running it, and what they want to add and take risk with. Excuse me.
And I think it's a fun question. Well, not a fun question. It's a good question to ask, partly because it doesn't come up as often as a player, because we often start out our players young with the hopes that they will get to become old. But there's this issue that happens in all campaigns in some way, shape, or form, that people's lives change, and being able to be in a campaign for long enough for your character to go from being in their 20s to being in their 80s and needing to, or whatever the age range looks like for your character, needing to deal with some of these issues that could potentially happen of, I've experienced 20 wars. What has that done to my character's brain, right?
Yeah.
That, either the campaign ends or falls apart, if you want to put it that way, before your character gets to that point, even though when you started your character, you had hopes that you would be able to get to play them in their old age too.
So I want to ask another question. This is actually a warm up into the other main question I had. Is, do you think if these the different races or whatever, a race that has a naturally ability to heal, like a regeneration thing, like trolls are the only thing coming to my mind, because trolls have like a regeneration thing, every round they heal so many points, they just naturally have this. They're like Deadpool. Deadpool's not a good example because Deadpool's just all screwed up in many different ways, but something like that. Do you think in that essence they have that ability to, like, I don't know, process it all better almost? Like, do they still have mental scars, or is it too beyond a point where it affects them personally instead of, it's not exactly something that can be healed? I know I'm not explaining.
You mean
it very
in
well.
general, like adventurers to have regeneration that affects their physical wounds, do you think it also helps heal like PTSD basically?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that depends on the individual based on how I draw from the real world, and I like to make characters representative of a wide breadth of people. Um, it's a really interesting question, and I think it goes back to what you were saying about how do healing potions work. Like, we don't know how regeneration works either. If it doesn't help with things like heartbreak, then I don't think it's going to help with mental.
There's an aspect of that I enjoy about roleplay that we have HP, right? You get to 0, you're dead. But the real world,
unconscious.
it's sorry, the other aspects of the real world that don't just involve your physical self, you have your mental self and your spiritual self. So in this alternate universe where you have an RPG that tracks all of those, you would need to track all of them. And then you could have healing that could help your mental health or your spiritual aspect of heartbreak or something else that is specific for physical health, that you would need something separate for all of them. Because as if we're talking about D&D specifically, as that world plays right now, the only thing that we are tracking and the only thing that is healing, unless you're playing your character a very specific way, is your physical body.
Cool.
I think in 3.5 D&D, where they had the extra, I don't know their abilities or really saves. What do they call them? It was like there was willpower, reflex, and fortitude, right?
Yeah.
And I would think that willpower and fortitude together, like those aspects of characters, would help determine, like, okay, how should my character be influenced by this? Like, if you couldn't get a sense for that on your own, go look at the stats. Like, what are they saying? Can they just suffer through the power through? And how well can they take it all? Like, how much can you push yourself and how much can you protect yourself? Fortitude and willpower. That's something I think is missing from recent editions. But
I was just going to say that's the thing I struggle with the most. When you get to 0 HP, you're unconscious on the ground, you now are relying on dice to tell you whether or not you can wake back up. Instead of your character, like the character that you've built to say, she's strong enough now, or she's not strong enough to be able to make it out of this scenario.
And that does fluctuate. Like, it's not a set standard. Like, you might be more likely to, and like your trajectory, like your patterns are, I'm a stronger person. But what if you just went through like a character arc where it's testing you at your limit and you fell to 0 when it mattered the most? Is your character going to be disappointed by that? And the mental health is going to be like, I failed, and like that's what's going to be sinking in, or no, I can't fail. This can't be happening, and they fight mentally to stay alive. Like,
I like
the mechanic for that is gone.
And it's the real world aspect of, and I guess I've seen it played out more in movies than in the real world of like there's this part of if you're in a coma of like do I have the willpower to come back from the coma, or am I done with the world and I'm good to let go? And there's, different movies and shows where they have other people playing a part in this of it's okay for you to let go, or no, we need you back in the real world kind of, that I wish that we got to play out in an RPG more that would require the characters being able to interact while they're unconscious.
I would like to interject, though. So we're talking about having the willpower to be able to get back up from a wound and keep fighting. I would like to interject that take Constitution and there's a whole lot more. Constitution's very broad. There's a whole lot more attached to it. But I think if you could get away with swapping Constitution and just putting willpower there, because part of that is what it is. It's your
Constitution representing mental stuff, because I've always read that as a bodily function.
And that's what the issue is.
And that's maybe why willpower is still missing from our perspective.
And my father, he made a game, and when his stats, the stats that he used, he had, it's going to take me a minute. He has strength, dexterity,
He has more mental.
coordination. Oh no, he doesn't have dexterity. He has strength, coordination. He has willpower. Intuition. There's one more I'm missing. Charisma, and then it says one more and I'm forgetting. But he has willpower as a separate thing, and willpower funnels into the amount of HP you have, because that is that is your drive. That is your okay. My willpower is gonna help me. It's gonna help me grit my teeth and get through this gaping wound in my side. And
so at that point, your hit points, like your body and your mental ability to take a hit, is mixed.
Goes together.
Yeah.
So if you take too much of a beating on your body, your mind is going to start failing too.
Yep. So Constitution, like I said, it's broad, and yes, the way that it is worded, I'm gonna and it says right here next to Constitution measures health, stamina, and vital force. It sounds it is more directed towards physical stuff. I see it as more. It only has a little bit of willpower connected to it, because health can't really health all that part is it's more of a that's my how much I can drink, how healthy I am, do I get sick often, etc., etc. We got stamina. Stamina is sure, I do a lot of cardio, so therefore I can handle more, but that's still me having to push myself mentally to be able to keep running. And vital force, I don't really know how to describe that besides just straight willpower. But I feel like if they've worded this more differently, it would be more of a mental thing than a physical thing.
Well, what I do think works, what works is with the death saves and fail saves, it's not explained much. So you do have room for storytelling there.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And in real world, it doesn't matter how much willpower you have. If you are down to 0 hit points, if your body failed, there's only so much your own willpower can.
Yeah.
There's only so far it can take you before you're stabilized, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's what those really represent, is the dice are showing an opportunity for you to tell a story of those last moments and how that struggle went and how bad the wounds were compared to your willpower.
Yeah.
So we're talking a whole lot of mental thing, and I'm trying to, and that's what the theme of this video is. We're talking a whole lot about how willpower and PTSD and how it affects our player. So as bringing up to the other second main question, let's talk about psychic damage. Now, what exactly, in a reference to all of this, what exactly is psychic damage? Are you just inflicting on some unknown trauma, you get a flash of PTSD that's not, that you shouldn't have PTSD, you had a good childhood or whatever, but now all of a sudden, as this person is hitting you with, I can't think of a spell that does psychic damage off the top of my head, but they're hitting you with a spell and it affects you psychically. What exactly is that, and how is it affecting that character?
I have done thought experiments on how psychic damage would work, because there's not sure if cutting words is psychic damage, but it sure feels psychic.
Let me look.
Yeah, look, check for me.
Cunning words. I typed in cutting. Cunning.
It is cutting.
Cutting?
Isn't it? I think it's cutting, you're severing something. Maybe it's cunning words. And
let me just go to my let me just go to the bard that I built just the other day. Here we go. Helpful. You're talking. I was thinking vicious mockery.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Okay,
actually.
Vicious mockery is psychic damage. Yes, so vicious mockery is psychic damage.
Okay, so imagine someone doing vicious mockery, and how does that actually translate into physical damage. Now we could probably say like maybe there's an aspect of mental damage that's mixed into HP like your father's game, like mechanically, but I wasn't really considering that when I was doing this thought experiment. It activates certain neural pathways in your mind to hear criticism about yourself psychologically.
Yeah.
And maybe the magic from that hijacks the energy that's going through your brain now and just like extra fries it. So it actually is pain because there's too much energy going on in your brain, and it's a real zinger. It's something that someone's criticizing you about. So
all right.
Which most people are psychologically prone to criticism, whether or not they handle it.
Yeah. So vicious mockery is a great low-level psychic damage spell that like can pretty much hurt anybody at any point in time for making fun of them.
And not to mention,
but I'm trying to. I don't remember any of the characters or any of the spells off the top of my head, but I know that there are some, probably NPCs or monsters, that do massive amounts of psychic damage, where they just either put themselves in your brain and start pulling things until it hurts. Or I know that I've done some of this with one of the characters in my campaign that I DM, where his own memories are overloading his brain, causing psychic damage.
I wonder who that could be.
Kind of what Micah said. There's too much happening at one time, causing it to be physically painful.
There's the 9th level spell Psychic Scream, which basically does that. It overloads your brain.
Yeah.
That's a really nasty one. I think it's just about overwhelming the brain, which is a biological component of your body.
Right, that you can hurt. Yeah.
You can hurt that. Like you can do stress damage to your brain with prolonged stress. So why can't magic do psychic damage?
Do the same thing. Yeah. So, because it's magic, it can.
so the question is the psychic damage more of a physical side of things or a mental side of things?
Well, I think what we're trying to say is that it is affecting your brain physically.
Okay,
which
all right.
Could potentially be both.
So
yeah, if you're looking at, I think there's a distinguishment here between like how much of psychic damage is mental versus like soul based. I guess I'm not sure I agree with the whole word that I picked, because mental processes do happen with a biological function. So it does biological damage, but there's also this thing that we ascribe as humans, whether it's true or not, to our own selves, our soul, to explain that which is us and our own being and consciousness that isn't directly tied to biology as far as we can explain, right? So how much of that goes biological versus, I think, soul-based?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how much?
Which is very difficult to portray. It's easy to portray personality in a character, but it's very difficult to. You're your own person. How can you put someone else's imaginary soul, if you will, into another character? And that's part of the. It's part of the joy of playing a character, is that you get to put, and Jonah says this often, that he puts a different part of himself into each character that he makes. That's why all of his characters are his favorite characters, because they all have a different part of him. And I think that's one of the joys of getting to play role-playing games, is that you get to pick either a favorite part or a detrimental part of yourself that you want to exemplify and play out, but you're not going to be able to capture all of yourself or all of a brand new person soul that can't exist.
Well, I think players are inseparable from their characters. So anything that you mentally experience, good or unhealthy, like
is going to play into your
either
character.
way is going to get into your character somehow, even if it's just trace amounts, because you are good at acting and stuff.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, exactly. So it
never
has,
be 100% self-aware.
Yeah, so your character has a soul in that sense, in that it is you. Like, you're the puppet master behind it, And so there's no way to separate fully yourself from your character. Like, there's the full separation that your character is fictional, but then there's still the lack of separation because you are your character at the same time.
Cool.
It's a lot of brain things.
So that brings us to the second main question that I had. So going back to our lovely troll buddy with a healing factor type of deal.
Mm-hmm.
So would a creature or character or whatever be able to heal from psychic damage?
Mechanically, yes. If you have psychic scream happens to you and you lose 60 HP, drink a healing potion, you get it back. Mechanically, you are healed from your psychic damage, right?
I think psychic damage and conditions are different.
Mm-hmm.
Let me pull up
Psychic damage just speaks to the biology.
Yeah.
And conditions like madness, fear.
Right.
I think these things play out in stories pretty often, and those, if they could be cured by a potion, someone would not be mad anymore.
Right. And I currently have that on one of my characters. She's terrified that she is being followed everywhere she goes, right? And it is affecting the way that she acts in every way, shape, and form. It is a mental problem that she is now dealing with. So we could have brought up madness, would have been a great thing to bring up when we were talking about stuff.
I did want to say that they did come close to having like mental illnesses in the form of madness, but that's like very not exactly bizarre things. There's a couple bizarre things that like you eat dirt, or what was the one? I'm trying to think, what was the one that
there's some of them that would be categorized as paranoia.
Yeah.
Other ones are just weird, but some of them could also be if you wanted to make a line somewhere where there is a real mental illness that goes with the madness. Then that's, like Micah mentioned earlier, the creators, the publishers of the people who created our D&D world had to get their sources from somewhere. There's only so much fantasy before you run into the real world.
Mm-hmm. So you think that the character with a generation would still be able to heal from a psychic type of damage?
Psychic damage itself is healable. It's not excluded from healing potions.
Okay. So then it is more of a, I want to say, it's more of a physical type of deal. But
it's a type of damage could be classified the exact same as bludgeoning damage.
Mm-hmm.
Some characters have resistances to it. So if you've got a really strong mind, you may have resistance to psychic damage. I don't know there's a specific race that has that, but it's in this particular RPG, if we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons, there's no differentiation on what kind of damage you can heal. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, especially if we're doing healing potions specifically, there's not anything that says, oh, you can heal from piercing damage and bludgeoning damage, but nothing else, which would exclude the other 8 types of damages that you can take, right?
That makes sense.
Or I don't know how many types of damage there are. I feel like I missed them.
I was just thinking about, I guess that would make sense because madness would still affect a troll. It would still regenerate. I'm a little frustrated because the troll said, "Oh, if it takes acid or fire damage, it can't regenerate that." But this says nothing about psychic. I'm like, oh well. I feel like the way the troll's set up, I feel like psychic it wouldn't be able to heal from psychic damage only because it talks more about like actual wounds and whatnot. But anyways, I'm just being
Well, I think that, if you did bring it up. So I think that the acid and the fire types of damage disintegrate. So the other types of damage are repairable by some sort of connection. But if it's disintegrated, what is there to reassemble, right?
Yeah.
I think that's how troll regeneration works.
Okay, that's very fair.
So in the example that we brought up earlier of psychic damage breaking nerve endings or causing too much energy that burns something in your brain, it's repairable in that sense. Obviously, we're not doctors. Don't quote us on this.
No,
it might just get them inflamed to the point that there's too much pressure in the head, and that becomes like a bludgeoning trauma, and you have to recover from a concussion type of thing.
Yes.
Like we can come up with all these theories about how it actually works, but it is its own distinct type of damage.
Yep, that is fair. Well, I think that is everything that I wanted to ask. If there's anything, is there anything else you two would like to add on before I could close this episode?
Yes. Keep tabs on scientists researching things that come out of black holes.
That is not related. We're not related to this.
We've seen it. It's happened.
Whatever. Spelljammer. Yes, I know. Spelljammer. It came around. So now all you dungeon masters are probably scrambling to add.
Look it up. It's real.
Yeah, scrambling to add all of this into your new Spelljammer. But yes. Apparently that's a thing. Anyways. Thank you, Micah and Mary Beth, for joining me to talk about all the interesting, lesser touched upon things. I'm sure maybe they will have other things, but who knows? Maybe not. And thank you everyone else for joining us tonight. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to like and subscribe. As always, I'm Rick Quasar, and this has been myself, Micah, and Mary Beth, and I hope you guys join us in another one of our nerdy Dungeons & Dragons and discussions videos. If you have any suggestions of what you would like us to discuss, please let me know and get a hold of me. And everybody, have a good night.